Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Jordan Spurgeon. Thank you for joining us. Governor Doug Ducey issued an executive order to meet surging job demand and to support job creators throughout Arizona as employment opportunities grow and the COVID-19 vaccine is widely available. The order rescinds a March 2020 executive order that waived the requirement that an individual receiving employment benefits must be actively looking for work in order to receive those benefits. The Arizona Department of Economic Security will begin enforcing the reinstated requirement the week of Sunday, May 23rd. The ongoing recount of nearly 2.1 million Maricopa County ballots from the November 2020 election is starting to raise more questions as the process continues. Counting started on April 23rd after the state Democratic Party won a court order requiring security firm Cyber Ninjas to follow the law on ballot and voter secrecy and to file its policies with the court. The audit has a deadline of May 14th, but according to former Arizona Secretary of State Ken Bennett, questions aren't being answered and transparency in the process should be concerning. That mixed with fake information spreading online, he questions if the audit will be done by its deadline. So far, no results from the audit have been released. The Department of Homeland Security released a report last month outlining violations at a correctional center in Arizona. Cronkite News reporter Emma Vandenighty spoke with government officials about the report and analyzed the findings.
Some of it was pretty surprising.
The Department of Homeland Security has frequently conducted unannounced inspections, but the findings in the search of La Palma Correctional Facility in Eloy, Arizona last year stood out.
About 17% of the detainees wound up having positive COVID tests. And for that was a red flag for us.
They gathered data from 7 months of remote inspection, interviews, and footage. Upon their review, DHS found several violations of detainees' safety and well-being.
Detainee reports and grievances allege an environment of mistreatment and verbal abuse, including in response to detainee peaceful protests at the facility.
One of the main areas of concern in the report was grievances, with over 1,200 being filed during their inspection. 487 of those specifically complained about staff mistreatment.
We have information in a letter signed by 182 detainees that indicates that the facility used pepper spray, pepper balls, and chemical agents and punished detainees with lengthy stays in solitary confinement.
DHS used the performance-based national detention standards to assess their findings. The standards do state that non-lethal force can be used if the detainee is armed, cannot be approached due to danger, or delaying the situation would cause greater damage. At La Palma, many inmates decided to protest against the staff specifically for the lack of protective equipment given to combat COVID-19. According to DHS, the surveillance footage solidified their findings.
An actual visual of agents spraying detainees that are lying down on the ground in the facility.
La Palma is run by the private company CoreCivic under a contract with ICE. They disagreed with several findings. Specifically, faculty staff stated that their use of force was to quell civil disobedience. Cronkite News got a statement by email stating, ICE takes issue with the accuracy of other findings in the draft report which relied on uncorroborated allegations. ICE is committed to ensuring that all those in our custody reside in safe, secure, and humane environments and under appropriate conditions of confinement. Yet, DHS officials remain confident in the thoroughness of their findings.
Our view of the footage gives rise for concern, and we maintain that ICE needs to do more to ensure compliance and remedial action is taken to address La Palma's use of force.
DHS gave ICE 8 recommendations to improve the facility, varying from better medical documentation to action against detainee mistreatment. ICE has only agreed to 3 of those, and only 2 have been officially closed. DHS officials stated that they will continue to monitor the facility until all 8 have been resolved by ICE. Moving now to the sports world. For 31 years, the Phoenix Suns gorilla, also known as Go, has been a staple of the team and franchise. And now, Go is making headlines as the first professional sports mascot in history to secure an endorsement deal, including footwear, apparel, and accessories. He's teaming up with the Phoenix-based boutique shop Guest List to showcase new styles and trends in what's now called gorilla wear and bring the style hype to Suns fans in the Phoenix Suns area. The Suns play the Cavs tonight in Cleveland at 4 p.m. Speaking of basketball, while the men's game is winding down, the women's game is starting up. The Phoenix Mercury are currently in training camp. They play their first preseason game this Saturday against the Seattle Storm. Head coach Sandy Brondello says her team is in a much better place compared to where they were last season.
I think we're ahead of where we were last year, in the crazy world that we lived in. But look, I think it really helps when Diana and Skylar have, understand the playbook and have been great leaders of helping all the other players, just get up to speed. So, we've put a fair bit in. Now it's just about fine-tuning and just getting a little extra chemistry.
And now we'll look back at our stories from Washington, D.C. Bureau, from Equal Pay Day to changes in cherry blossom viewing.
More than 840,000 Arizonans have been infected by the COVID-19 virus. At least some of them have been hit by the virus variants from Brazil, Britain, California, and South Africa. And now it appears that Arizona has a variant of its own. Jake Holter brings us the details from our Washington Bureau.
It's called variant B.1.243.1, and there are currently 17 reported cases of it, 15 of them in Arizona. Ephraim Lim, a virologist at Arizona State University's Biodesign Institute, explains why this mutation could be a concern.
The E44K mutation has been shown to reduce antibody responses from monoclonal antibodies that are used as therapies, and also reduces the neutralization of post-vaccination serum.
Simply put, the mutation in the Arizona variant reduces the effectiveness of some antibody treatments for COVID-19 victims, as well as slightly lowering vaccine efficacy rates. Dr. Joshua LeBaire, the executive director of the Biodesign Institute, says the Arizona variant has the same mutation as the South African variant that was only recently found in the state, and vaccines have been effective against that variant, he says.
Although no one has specifically tested this mutation or viruses that have this mutation specifically with the vaccine trials, like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine trial, was done in South Africa after viruses with that mutation were already prevalent there.
Even though emerging virus variant may sound alarming, Will Humble, executive director of the Arizona Public Health Association, says it's not a reason to panic. Experts have long predicted the emergence of variants.
One of the things that we've known about this virus from the very beginning is that it's going to have mutations in its genetic coding, and the protein coat is going to slightly change over time.
While these variants could reduce the effective rate of vaccines, LeBaire said current evidence shows that vaccines seem to be working against them. And if a variant does prove resistant, Lim adds that vaccines can be easily altered. In the meantime, people should still get fully vaccinated, as it will save lives.
We can always update the vaccine, because right now we actually have many good vaccine platforms that work well, and all of them can be updated pretty quickly. So I don't think this is a problem.
In Washington, Jake Holter, Cronkite News.
Currently, there are no new cases of this new variant in Arizona. So as of right now, health officials are keeping a close eye on the variant's progress.
Today is Equal Pay Day, the day when an average woman's salary equals the amount an average man earned by December 31st of the previous year. And advocates say the pay gap has only worsened during the pandemic. Cronkite News reporter Molly Hudson has a report from our Washington Bureau.
What we've learned and what we continue to learn is that there's no level of status and there's no accomplishment or power that will protect you from the clutches of inequality.
U.S. women's national soccer team star Megan Rapinoe should know she's been the face of the fight for equal pay for players on men's and women's national teams.
We're so often told in this country that if you just work hard and continue to achieve, you will be rewarded, and rewarded fairly. It's the promise of the American dream, but that promise has not been for everyone.
Rapinoe was one of the witnesses today at a House hearing on Equal Pay Day, a day to be marked but not celebrated, says Jasmine Tucker, the director of research at the National Women's Law Center.
It marks the occasion that women are just falling behind, right? So like now we're starting in March basically to catch up to men. So like it's like a perpetual thing where we're just constantly falling behind by 3 months every single year.
Tucker Center reports that women in Arizona make 83 cents for every dollar that white men make, just a penny above the national average of 82 cents. But one witness says the pay gap comes from more than just gender discrimination.
There's a massive asterisk attached to that. This is uncontrolled. The raw data point does, number one, not compare two people in the same job, and number two, control for so many factors that influence pay.
Onwuka said the wage gap reflects choices women make in the workforce, and a one-size-fits-all government policy would take that choice away. Sex discrimination is illegal, but Rapinoe and other advocates say the pay gap still exists, and the time is now to make change.
We don't have to wait. We don't have to continue to be patient for decades on end. We can change that today. We can change that right now. We just have to want to. So, as always, LFG.
In Washington, Molly Hudson, Cronkite News.
As the Biden administration also ponders a massive infrastructure plan, officials from the Navajo and Colorado River Indian tribes told senators on Wednesday that they need sufficient funding for water projects and less federal oversight. Our Washington reporter Jake Holter explains more.
The Biden administration is preparing an infrastructure bill that could cost as much as $3 trillion. Tribal leaders said yesterday they hope some of that money will go to water projects, but they told senators that money is just one of the problems they face.
You don't need to just throw money at the problem. It helps, of course, but it's not the only thing holding tribes back.
Amelia Flores, chairwoman of the Colorado River Indian Tribes, told the Senate Indian Affairs Committee that another thing holding tribes back is too much federal oversight.
CRIT has dealt with a number of legal and policy barriers that make efficient water infrastructure challenging.
Flores said the most consequential of these barriers is the Indian Non-Intercourse Act, which prohibits tribes like hers from leasing water without congressional approval. The hearing on the state of water infrastructure in Native communities also heard from Jason John, the director of the Navajo Department of Water Resources. He agreed with Flores, saying the Navajo Nation also faces challenges at every phase of water development.
There is a federal nexus at almost every stage of domestic water development. There needs to be a review of and improvements to the current staffing levels, funding, and policies imposed upon programs that assist in the pre-construction and construction activities for water-related projects.
John says that while the Indian Health Service has done good work with what it has, needs still far exceed what the service can accomplish without additional staffing and funding. In 2020, the Navajo Nation had almost $4 billion in water-related development needs, and John said that the majority of that money, over $2.4 billion, is needed for critical domestic and municipal projects.
The collective goal should be to provide the necessary infrastructure so that thousands of families can live a better life.
And the first step to that goal, Flores says, is to include the people who know the needs best, the tribes themselves.
When tribes are excluded, ill-informed decisions follow.
In Washington, Jake Holter, Cronkite News.
More information on the Biden infrastructure plan is set to be released later next week as the president travels to Pittsburgh.
Today was supposed to be the deadline for small businesses to apply for aid from the Paycheck Protection Program, a multi-billion-dollar loan program to help companies weather the pandemic. But yesterday they got a 2-month reprieve. Jake Holter reports from our Washington bureau.
As he signed the extension yesterday, President Joe Biden said almost 90,000 small businesses are still waiting to be approved for a PPP loan.
There are hundreds of thousands of people who could lose their jobs and small and family businesses that might close forever.
Businesses now have until May 31st to apply for a PPP loan. Once they're in the system, applications will be considered for another 30 days, an additional grace period in this bill that is expected to make a big difference for businesses.
I think that's going to be helpful so that some small businesses aren't seemingly unfairly harmed by any processing delays.
Arizona businesses have filed 131,000 applications since the program began last year and received about $11.6 billion in loans, says Shivani Dubey, Deputy District Director in Arizona for the Small Business Association.
We've heard from various small businesses all over the state as far as some have been able to keep their payroll because of the PPP.
Despite some gripes about the early rollout of the program, Arizona business officials said PPP is now working out. Thomas Barr, Vice President of Business Development at Local First Arizona, says that this period of recovery is going to be critical for businesses.
Consumer confidence is on the rise, and more people are feeling comfortable visiting businesses, but we need to be really vigilant to ensure that we emerge out of the pandemic stronger than.
But Chad Heinrich of the National Federation of Independent Business says that while the extension is great news, small businesses still face, quote, very challenging economic conditions.
The small business optimism index remains below a historic 47-year average. That's not a good sign.
All the more reason a PPP extension is good news, Barr says.
I was just speaking to a business yesterday who thought that she was still on a deadline to get in a PPP application by March 31st. And I was able to tell her, hey, there's actually great news that this deadline is going to be extended.
In Washington, Jay Coulter, Cronkite News.
PPP loans are designed to be used for essential businesses' expenses and for worker pay under the program. The loan does not have to be paid back by the business that used the money to pay employees on payroll through the pandemic.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for Break It Down. That's next. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.